question, which was links to review. It didn't give any other context, so I'm not sure whether what I will feed back to you may or may not be useful in the context of what market you're going after. But anyway, we'll cover that as we go through. I see Anand's joined the call. Welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry, I was stuck at the join meeting link, assuming that I was going to be let in, and then I realized I had to click on the join meeting button. So sorry, I should.
Yeah, no problem at all. My apologies for the WebEx is always a little bit confusing. It's everybody has problems with it. So anyway, so this is just I spent some time just having a quick look at your website and your learning or documentation. But I have to start off with the context that I cover application platforms. I don't cover data platforms. I don't cover business intelligence. I don't cover reporting tools. So what I cover are tools for people to build applications, which usually involve some aspect of user interface or have some custom service development requirements. And from what I could gather from your website, and to be honest, it was confusing. It's not at all clear what you do. To me, as an analyst in application platforms, it looks more like that you're actually providing, reporting tools, probably more of a competitor to people like TIBCO Spotfire and Tableau and Power BI. Would that be correct, or have I misinterpreted it?
We do compete with them, but what we're hoping to do is break away from the confines of that and be a low-cap platform for data. An LCAP platform.
What do you mean, an LCAP platform for data? What do you mean by that?
Help people build data solutions that are not just about reporting, but also include machine learning, also visual solutions, and help them create, for example, a decision support system, help them create a digital twin, help them create an NLP model out of the data that they have, potentially flowing back into these transaction systems, therefore with a write back. So a certain amount of transactional elements as well. But being able to build such a system faster than open source through components, that's the crux of it.
Right. Okay. So you're definitely, there's no problem in heading in that direction as from a data platform perspective, but data platform itself can be misinterpreted. In the application space, a data platform is simply a system of record. What you're talking about is, for example, simply judging what you're looking at with things like access to Python, R libraries, etc., are elements to analyze data. And if you've seen Gartner research on the Gartner's view on data science, is that the gap, the context that needs to be applied to data science, and then especially to Power BI, Tableau, Spotfire types of users, is the concept of what decision you're improving. Now, I do have a little bit of an overlap there because I do assist Roy Schulte, who covers analytics, especially real-time analytics, with the decision engine space, which is where and decision modeling, which is where transactional applications get to meet data science derived AI/ML models, which are used to assist with decision making as part of transactions. So that's a perfectly reasonable target, but I didn't pick up on any of that from your website. So there's two things: what you do today, what you're hoping to do tomorrow, and your vision and how you're going to get there. It really should be part of your key part of your messaging on your website, I would have thought. So just going through my feedback on your website, and I'll send you these notes after the call. You start off talking about a PaaS data platform. As I said, there is no such thing as in Gartner's terminology for a PaaS data platform. We have DB, database platform as a service, integration platform as a service, AIML platform as a service, or BI. I think it's ABI platform as a service is what they call now. And indeed, we don't really even talk about platform as a service now, because the default is cloud delivery. So, mentioning somewhere that you are a cloud platform fully for full self-service without any operations makes perfect sense. But again, advertising yourself as platform as a service is a little bit strange. And then secondly, who's your target audience? The impression I got was you're targeting data scientists, and that's fine. But that's got to be clear. And data scientists aren't going to be interested in, I wouldn't have thought, in terminology like microservices and things like that. There may be business users who are interested in reporting. It may be that you're looking at citizen data sciences, and all of that is fine. But I'm afraid it's outside of my area of expertise, so I can't guide you on that. If you're looking at application platforms, and specifically for low-code application platforms, we define those as tools for building applications which have a user interface and contain business logic and data. And in particular, we add a restriction that it has to include a database as part of the platform to enable customers to be able to build, and collect data without, engaging with an IT team to set up a database for them. Then what you're missing there is user interface for data capture, any sorts of user interface development tooling or forms or anything like that. You did have a tagline. A second tagline I picked up on was engaging, which again it may be engaging for data scientists, but it doesn't. You don't really have user experience other than particular forms or charts or graphs or charts. You're doing output visualization, which again is fine. But my question would be, well, where does that fit? Does that you mentioned later you plug it into Excel, you can plug it into PowerPoint. That's fine, but they're not application platforms. One thing to consider is, well, what application platform or application development do you augment? Can I plug these into Salesforce, or can I plug them into, what sort of tools are there that are missing this capabilities, or which you can extend? Is it for customers of ServiceNow who are missing these sorts of graphs, or all those effectively competitors and therefore not likely target candidates? What's the audience, again, from a platform perspective? You then mention reusable microservices. Now, Gartner, we tend to take a strict view on terminology. So reusable microservices is a little bit of a contradiction in terms. Microservices are focused on a particular service, and I think you're really talking about the capabilities of the platform. So you have these various units for importing and exporting and things like that. So capabilities, processes, maybe services. They may be mini services. It may be that you're trying to emphasize that they are small, but if they're running as simply a service you configure and run on your platform, then its size is irrelevant. It's simply configurable services or something like that, which is the what I would expect to see there. You then talk about you don't need to create components. So that immediately sort of seemed a red flag to me, because if you can't create components, then you're a closed system. And if you're somebody like SAP or Infor, that may be good enough. But for startups, you need to have extensibility. But later on, you've got, for example, extensibility via Python and things like that. So, and in fact, the Gartner vision on the future of application development is very much one of components, componentization, modularity, and being able to extend that modularity to enable developers to quickly assemble applications. So the creation of components should be a key aspect, something that I would look for, rather than something claiming that I can't do that. It's just a claim, because you claim later on that you can build extensions. But the point is that it's closing that down is not a good message to give. You had mentioned about the real-time things like real-time heat map. That looked interesting, but I don't know, how competitive that is. There's a number of sort of like graph capabilities I'm sure you offer. Uh, Probably you want to, list them, with examples. You did have an example later on, which was under Gramex.com service requests, which showed a very interesting process workflow optimization for process data. And if that's a specific vertical market you want to go into, then I would encourage that. You probably ought to speak to my colleague Mark Kerrimans, who covers enterprise business process analysis. And there'd be no harm in doing that. In fact, one of the things we suggest to small vendors is that instead of trying to boil the ocean and take on all vendors as competitors, you should look at specific use cases like that, exploit them and build out on them, and provide enter the market via specialization and filling gaps. So that process workflow optimization looked very nice. But how it fitted with other enterprise business process analysis tools, whether it's you worked with other technologies, I don't know, but that could be something you could build upon. I also liked your built-in vulnerability report links. I'm not sure whether they were real or not, but you did include the GitHub links. I thought that was nice. I think if your target persona invariably would include some IT people. So having your separate page for product architecture and technologies should certainly have that for customers to look at, and possibly include some explanation as to what they're looking for or looking at. You then covered app pricing. But I didn't really understand what you meant by an app, given that you're a reporting tool. Is that a single workflow? Is it a use case, etc.? For in the low-code application platform space, we don't see app pricing very often because of that definition issue. What is an app? We tend to see SaaS-based pricing, i.e. per end user, which is again as my understanding is what the data reporting tools use as well. It may be that you're looking at that as a competitive advantage. I think that's fine to look for competitive advantage on pricing, but at this point in time, you're not really an application platform anyway. So it's you need to be a little bit careful there. Also, look at the integration platform pricing as well. The integration platform is sort of like in between what you're doing and application development. Is part of automation in general. And in fact, in terms of positioning, you could also look at hyper automation for data as a positioning slogan for usage. Hyper automation encompasses process. It's obviously we see a lot of that being kicked off by RPA developments today. And providing analytics for RPA vendors and customers could indeed be an interesting possible solution. We haven't seen, as far as I know, any particular association of data science to legacy systems and legacy data access. So that could be an interesting niche as well. My colleague Sycat Ray covers the RPA market. Might be able to give you guidance on that. Let's see. And then you did have a blog post on low-code application platforms and your view of that. So, lovely self-serving blog post. I was intrigued to see that you referenced a vendor I've never come across called VisionX, which when I clicked on it, looked like a systems integrator. So, providing guidance for potential customers is absolutely fine. Being honest is going to get you much further than claiming doing lots of self-serving marketing, I would have thought. But that's a go-to-market issue. Gartner TSP team to help you on go-to-market details. Let's see. Covered the process workflow optimization, chart designs. So do consider the ecosystem. If your charts are your primary value add to as far as the customer is concerned, then comparing what you deliver on charts versus those other vendors like Mendix, Power Apps, Salesforce, etc., would be good, so that you can explain to customers why they should be looking at you. There will be a different delta between what they offer and you offer for each one, but simply listing those and explaining the advantage that you have and why they should be looking at you for your charting would seem to make sense. And there is also another link to software, which I think was meant to be using your tools for tag analysis, but I couldn't get it to work for me, so it fell a bit flat. Again, having an explainer for the report to explain how you can exploit it, and indeed having that available for customers to try out on open source data like GitHub data is a very good idea. I was rather hoping I'd be able to do a search on GitHub for Kubernetes tags or something like that. You could easily be very popular for doing sort of like some simple providing simple search charting like that. But anyway, just to let you know, maybe it makes sense to a data scientist, but from an application perspective, I have no idea what I was looking at for there. So anyway, that was my quick feedback on the primary website, on the learning website. I think that's fair enough, but it's clearly you're in the data science space, not in the application platform space right now. I would not necessarily recommend you invest lots of time and money trying to build out things like user interface components. Do consider partners or M&A to get to those levels very quickly. There are open source tools like Convertigo, for example, is an open source mobile and web application development platform you can exploit. I'm sure there are others as well, if you wanted to go into that application platform space. But I would seriously question as to whether you really want to do that and whether there's some other niche or other area you should be focusing on, exploiting the data science aspects of what you're doing and the ecosystems available to like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Microsoft, etc. Anyway, that's my feedback and a bit of a monologue. Sorry about that. Any questions?
Thanks, Paul, firstly, for the open feedback. And that's something that's really going to be helpful, because when we have been looking at our way of, as we've been pivoting, we are pretty confused. I guess the confusion came through. So good to see how confused we are when.
Well, you didn't come across as confused. It just came across as muddled messaging. So I wouldn't insult you by saying you were confused. In fact, I would take the opposite approach. You're clearly doing something interesting, but I couldn't pick out from the website what that was.
Got you. And that's helpful. That's something that we will change. We planned it slightly differently. What we wanted to do was walk you through what we were doing, but this has actually been more helpful. And rather than take that approach, I just had a few specific questions around this.
Yes, of course.
So, what we're doing is creating a platform where people can build different kinds of data solutions, and it's not entirely focused as to what we mean by a data solution. So, given that we'd rather pick specific subsets, specific areas, which are large categories in themselves, build the capability around that, and then expand beyond that. We've started off as being an organization that helps build dashboards, custom dashboards, the kind of dashboards that a tool like Tableau or Power BI or Spotfire cannot build, and typically for audiences that are very particular about how it should be represented. One large segment of that audience are senior executives. So one area that we want to focus on is executive decision support systems, platform that can help developers build a dashboard that a CXO needs in exactly the way that they need it rapidly. The differentiation we aim for is that speed. And the reason we do that is, as part of the organization is also a services organization. We have to do it fast. That's what gives us our efficiencies. And we want to convert that capability through our platform into an offering as well. Another kind of solution that we're going after is custom digital twins, not of the engineering kind, but of the business kind. What you saw in service requests is effectively a process twin. And going after that has a category was our second rung or bucket. And then we have a few others, but these two are our immediate narrow target markets. And the objective is to be able to build, at least starting from these two kinds of solutions. Who do we want to use today? It's developers. And when organizations scale their needs, the skill set that an organization can take for granted of a developer is lower and increasingly lower. And we're bucketing that under the term citizen developer, someone who could code, maybe great front end developer, but not necessarily familiar with the back end. Someone who has a smattering could probably write some Visual Basic macros, but not familiar with Python. We want to target that audience. The way we've done this is through configuration, not UI. And that transition from configuration to UI is something that we are in the middle of. So the components exist, you put a YAML file and put in the parameters, but even I, as the author of some components, forget some of those configuration parameters and have to look up the documentation. So why suffer? Have a UI that lists them all out, explains what they do, and you see what you get. So that's who we're targeting, a citizen developer as a user. And who we're targeting as a buyer for the platform is a chief data officer, a chief analytics officer, or a CIO, potentially engineering head as well. And what they get is quick turnaround without reskilling. It's flexible because you can extend it through code, and it's got a large number of pre-built configurable components that you can extend or use as is, which makes it fast. And that is what we want to pitch. So in this context, sort of like a 3-minute summary of what the website was absolutely
very
not
good.
saying.
Yeah, no, that's very good, very good. No, it makes perfect sense, and I think that's absolutely fine. It makes perfect sense to be focusing on that. I don't, because I don't cover the market for dashboards, though. I can't really give you much guidance. I can tell you, with citizen developers, we see we see citizen developers in application development being treated as a scale issue. That's really the biggest concern, and especially developer governance. We mostly deal with vendors like Microsoft with Power Apps, possibly a few of the smaller vendors like QuickBase, etc. The biggest concern from Gartner clients is on developer governance. But I think with a data science platform and citizen data science, that's a whole different sort of like aspect. You have probably citizen developers who are really business developers who understand the goals of what they're trying to demonstrate. They understand their data. They need to have easy access to it, so having a flow diagram to enable them to quickly put together the data flows in order to execute the visualizations is probably key. But again, it's very difficult for me to give you insight into that because it's not the area I cover. So I would suggest going back to people like Van Baker or or Whit Andrews, the other analysts covering data science and analytics and ABI platforms to carry on this conversation, because what you're saying makes perfect sense. We at Gartner have good data to show that citizen data science is very much a trend and something to vendors should be exploiting. But it's not something I cover, so I simply can't give you any good input on that. I think you've already spoken to some of my colleagues, so you will have you have had some interactions with some of them. I will check and send you some of the others who are dealing with citizen data science, and I'll send you those after the call with my feedback on your website. And I would suggest following up with them. As I said, I simply don't cover that area, so I can't tell you, what are the buying patterns or who are the buyer persona. I don't have any of that data. I have it for application developers, but that's different from people building reports. I simply don't cover that. There is a little bit of overlap in the sense that some, for example, business processes. And we see some, for example, users of, for example, ServiceNow are also looking at data of those processes. But I don't even take calls on those. That's a sort of like auxiliary use case on, if I've got the data, how do I exploit it more? Those sorts of calls will still go to our data science analysts rather than myself. So other than a shared platform or platform as a source of data, it's there's nothing else I deal with on that.
Understood. Now it's helpful to understand what Gartner Teams and application platform. This is helpful. I just had one last question. I don't know if Sandeep you had any, but sorry, I'll just take this one. You mentioned that citizen developers, specifically in application development, are a scale issue, and developer governance is the biggest concern. Curious what the next two concerns might be.
Typically, it's around things like setup. I mean, the sorts of things, the discussions we have with organizations around citizen development are around, things like how you scale across all these different people. So it's typically around things like how you set up a community of practice and how you set up a center of excellence to support those communities of practice. How do you scale your IT, for example, security advisors or your user interface designers, etc., across that citizen development community? That's really the main thing. We have a governance framework we talk to clients about, where we say, if you're doing simpler applications, that's fine, but the further you get away from that simple, CRUD or workflow, and wider audiences, the more you need to have IT ownership and IT involvement. We talk about fusion teams, which is the Gartner terminology for collaborations, trying to encourage and enforce the forever sort of like challenges of collaboration between IT and business in order to deliver these types of solutions. So those are the sorts of conversations we tend to have. We do talk to, keep tabs on our Gartner research on this. We had some research over the past year around what we called business technologists, i.e., who in organizations were doing technology types of aspects. And you can see that over a third of the people who were claimed to be doing some technology development were doing data analytics. So that's your audience. 34% of 40% of the entire workforce is still a huge number. So I wouldn't want to discourage you from your at your target, because that's clearly a very interesting area. I suspect the interesting challenge there is, of course, finding a path in between the major vendors. But so in terms of our guidance to Gartner clients, with citizen development, we're telling them, yes, it's a real thing, and yes, they should be tooling up for it. And we tell the vendors that the biggest gap that we see from Gartner clients is around this governance issue, how to handle this governance issue, how to handle the handoff and the interaction between the professional developers and the citizen developers. And I expect the same is in data science as well. At what point, how do you get guidance on what sort of report you should use, and what sort of machine learning mechanisms should apply, and handling that interaction is probably going to be key as well. So but I don't know what their guidance is. As I said, it's not an area I cover.
Thank you so much for this, Paul, both on the feedback on the website and review of what we shared. Very helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. It's always interesting to see new vendors. Obviously you're transitioning, as you said, into wider market areas. So I'll certainly keep an eye out to see how you progress in future. And good luck. As I said, it sounds like a perfectly sound strategy. And good luck with that journey.
Thanks, Paul. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.